Hi, my name is Angelina Dominguez, and I teach AP Computer Science Principles at Veterans Tribute Career and Technical Academy in Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's see what we're going to talk about today. Basically, we're going to be discussing various ways that using computers can raise legal and ethical concerns, looking at intellectual property, legal ways we can use material created by someone else, and the legal and ethical concerns raised by access to computing devices. So first, let's discuss what intellectual property or IP is. IP basically consists of creations from your mind. So inventions, literary works, artistic works, or designs, symbols, names, images, everything that we create would be our intellectual property. Ever since things have been digitized and IP can now be easily saved on a computer, that means that our intellectual property can also easily be accessed and distributed quicker and easier. This raises concerns about ownership and whether someone is allowed to use someone else's creations. So this brings us to copyright. When you create something, anything, you write a song, you take you take a picture, you paint or draw a picture. When you create anything, you automatically own what's called an all rights reserved copyright to whatever you created. Copyright protects your intellectual property and keeps anyone from using it unless you give them your express permission. When and if someone uses material created by someone else without permission and presents it as their own, as we all know, it is considered plagiarism and might have some legal consequences. However, there are legal ways that we can use materials created by someone else. These include Creative Commons, something called open source, and also open access. So let's start with Creative Commons. Sometimes this full copyright is too restrictive, and you might actually want other people out there to use or distribute your intellectual property creations. What if you draw a picture and you want millions and millions of people out there to see it and share it with one another without the hassle of coming to you every single time to ask your permission? What if you want the song you wrote to be freely shared, reused, added to by the rest of the world? Well, the answer for us is called Creative Commons. Creative Commons provides free licenses that we can use to tell all those millions of people out there how we want them to use our creations. All we really have to do is go to the Creative Commons website, answer a couple questions about how you want people to use your work, like whether you want people to be able to use it for commercial purposes or whether you want others to modify your creation. And once you answer those questions, then you'll be given the Creative Commons license that matches the permissions that you want attached to your creation. This Creative Commons license will clearly tell people what they can and can't do with your intellectual property. It lets you refine your copyright so that it works better for you in this world where there's so much digital creation and collaboration out there, and access to one another's creations is so much easier. Open source are programs that are made freely available for anyone to use. And not only are people allowed to freely use open source programs and creations, but they're also encouraged to make modifications and then redistribute them. The open source model encourages open collaboration. And then there's open access. This is a set of practices through which online research is output and distributed online free of any and all costs or other restrictions on access, and also free of restrictions on use, such as copyright or license restrictions. Regardless of how you are legally using something created by someone else, though, we should always remember to make sure we cite the creations and give credit to where it belongs. Now, as a result of open access, open source, and Creative Commons, the broad access to digital information has been made easier. This means there's a lot of digital information, programs, software, all these other creations at our fingertips. And many people out there are able to access all these things easily. And while open source programs, for example, may be created with good intentions, the fact that it is free to use and encouraged for others to modify invites people to sometimes, unfortunately, use them to harm individuals or groups of people, which raises legal and ethical concerns. Think about the possible legal concerns with software that's developed that allows access to digital media downloads and streaming, or even the development of a computing device that collects and analyzes data by continuously monitoring individuals' activities. What about the ethical concerns, such as software that includes algorithms that have bias, or the ethical concerns raised by the digital divide? In case you haven't learned about the digital divide yet, this is the unequal distribution of access to technology. So, for example, those over the age of 65, families with a lower income, those who live in rural areas, or even certain races and ethnicities typically don't have equal access or an equal understanding of how to use the internet and technologies available to anyone. So even though access to things people create on the internet is made easier with open access and open source and Creative Commons, doesn't necessarily mean everyone will be able to access those free resources equally. So we've reached the end. We talked today about various ways that using computers can raise legal and ethical concerns. We looked at intellectual property, legal ways we can use material created by someone else, and the ethical concerns raised by access to computing devices. So that's all for today. See you next time.